My dear friend Joyce shared this quote with me this week. Through small but audacious acts of theft, the I becomes a self. These 12 words sum up my identity, an identity that reaches back before my birth to my family's immigration to Canada over 100 years ago, and continues to define me today. My dad's parents immigrated to Powell Street in Vancouver in the 1910s, then moved to Vancouver Island, which is where this photo was taken in the 1930s. My dad is yet to be born. Although they were a working-class family and had few assets, you can see that they were probably happy with a promising future. Then this happened. It's from the bombing of Pearl Harbor. This event was a perfect opportunity for the BC's then white supremacist majority to finally dispose of the industrious Japanese-Canadian family, who had been formidable contenders in the fisheries and agriculture industries. My dad was still an infant when he, along with 22,000 other Canadian citizens of Japanese racial origin, were stripped of their human and property rights and shipped to internment camps and beet farms on the prairies. My family went to work on the beet farms in southern Alberta so that they could keep the family together. Here they are pulling sugar beets by hand during the war years. My grandfather is third from the left, died 24 years before I was born. My grandmother on the right died when I was a little boy. My Uncle Min is third from the right, and to this day he will not speak about what happened in those years. So a lot of my personal history is lost. Dispersed across the country, Japanese Canadians were forced to blend in with the rest of Canada. Before the war, it was rare to marry non-Japanese people, but after the war, the intermarriage rate exceeded 90%. My dad, the youngest of 6, married my mom, the oldest of 5, from a Polish, Scottish, Irish family in December 71. And this is the result, my brother and I. I grew up outside Edmonton with all the comforts of a stable, middle-class, suburban white family that my parents worked hard to provide. I am the oldest of 3, and my parents have been married now for 42 years. And yes, I said white. Although half Japanese, all I ever wanted to be was like my friends, white. Despite my best efforts, you can't beat genetics though, and in this exaggerated image, when I was 17, I got schooled in the Asian flush while trying to keep up with my beer-swilling Ukrainian English friends at parties. To this day, I still self-identify as white though. And I was a pretty creative kid. I loved drawing and working with materials, and I won an award for the highest marks in industrial arts and for 2 consecutive years in junior high. But when the system forced me to choose between arts and science, I took the practical path and posted grades that were just above the requirement to get me into engineering. Meanwhile, during those years, a grassroots movement was going on across the country that at that time I couldn't care less about. It was being fought for by second and third generation Japanese Canadians who were children during World War II, and as adults realized the magnitude of the injustice their parents had endured during the war. And they won that fight. Redress was granted in 1988, 25 years ago this year. Because of what my grandparents suffered and what my parents worked for, I lived a comfortable life. But it's taken almost 20 years for me to realize this, and to realize that my life situation is not a privilege, it's a responsibility. Out of university, I leapt head first into the corporate world. And by 30, I was a senior executive of a $25 million company. I had some good times in those 15 years, but once I hit the boardroom, the corporate agenda of profit, profit, profit began to stifle me. Soon enough, I hated my job and myself. The final 2 years were the lowest of my life. My wife and I divorced, and I bounced around from relationship to relationship, job to job. I ended up in Vancouver after a broken engagement with a woman from Washington. I fell back into familiarity and took an accounting job on the 33rd floor of a glass tower in Vancouver's financial district. Finally, at 35, a mere 2 months into articling for my chartered accountant, I realized I had been following the system script for success, and although I didn't have to worry about money, I wasn't very happy. Rather than being honest with myself, I had let the system mold me into a productive cog in the machine. I figured it was time to be honest with myself. So I quit that financially lucrative career and went to film school. Delusional, crazy, unfathomable are words that some of my friends blurted out at me. Others finally dropped their corporate cheerleader facade and secretly congratulated me. All the while I was pooping in my drawers. With the influence of my academic brother, Dr. Jeff, shown here, I began to think more critically about things, and I wanted to know more about my family and my history. Here we are at the archive looking into our grandparents' confectionery store in Vancouver. We began to work together on projects that I think fulfill some of the responsibility of my privileged position that I mentioned earlier. My first documentary was a collaboration with a research project of his, Surviving in the Cracks. It's a film about a group of ex-street kids who used theater to advocate for the reopening of some safe houses that protected vulnerable girls from the sex trade. They were closed in 2004 by the then Minister of Children and Family Development, Christy Clark. You might have heard of her. Dispossession is a photograph I made 2 years ago that sums up our current collaboration in one image. Here we have 3 downtown East Side folks walking eastwards from the Woodwards redevelopment. We also see a line of ghosts of Japanese Canadian families following an RCMP officer, while a ghost of a Coast Salish woman waits in the forest. These people are audaciously stealing back their community with marches and pickets. They are facing gentrification in the exact area that the Japanese community was displaced from in 1942. But unlike Japanese Canadians, there will be no future generations to fight for an apology or reparations from the government. The consequences will be homelessness, jail, or death. Through small but audacious acts of theft, the I becomes a self. This quote suggests to me that identity cannot be trusted in the hands of the system. Before you know it, it'll either be lost, as in my life, or stolen, as in my grandparents. To get it back will require work and some uncomfortable decisions, and to remain true to it will require discipline. Thank you.